take your seats.
And we're live. Okay.
Well,
just before we start this,
Yep.
I suppose, for those of us who don't know, who is Hector Wheeler? What's he?
Yeah, it's a
What does
question
he
on
do?
anyone's lips. I am an archaeologist,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of meddling around, also trying to be a bit creative as well in it, and I've just come back from Mongolia,
Yeah.
and I hope to regale you with some stories
Mm.
from lands afar, from the Grand Tatar regions.
Mm.
And I was on it. Part of it was me being an archaeologist, as like the British representative of archaeology, and my opposite number was Mongolian, and so I've just come back and enjoying the summer,
Mm.
and I'm now here
Yeah.
in Alfie's back garden, where I've often supped,
Yeah. Yeah.
and having a nice cup of tea.
Lovely. So I suppose the question that I really wanted to ask you was, what is Mongolia like to a Brit like yourself? You know, how different is it?
I suppose it depends on how you were brought up, because there's two different elements to Mongolia, and we began in Ulaanbaatar, which was very city-like. It was kind of trying to be a city. It had ex-Soviet tower blocks that were kind of being renovated, and there's a lot of development going on. But it was also I think it's the most polluted city in the world. And there was the nucleus was this huge power plant that had this kind of hourglass chimney that it was smoking. There was so much smoke coming out of it. But then once you get out of there, your real kind of country, my kind of country bumpkin essence, I felt a lot more at home there, because there was a lot more open place. It was amazing how here you have fences and hedgerows, and you even have bushes, but because the Mongolian winter is so harsh, it goes down to like -40. You don't have anything that can't survive those harsh conditions. So really, and horses and grazing cattle just kind of bulldoze almost, along with like the glacial winters, just bulldoze away any vegetation that isn't hardy, and so you've only got seasonal growth for a few months of grasses that come around, and you don't have any fences, you don't have any hedges, you don't have anything that kind of stops the eye or anything. It's just like a country park with a lawn that's just never ending, and it just carries on, and it covers all these jagged tips of the hill ranges, which have some. It's quite interesting. The glacial movement thousands of years ago placed these horizontal slabs, huge horizontal slabs of stone, just gently placed them on top of, just balancing on top of the top of the hill. So you scan the horizon, and there's these dips and furrows, and on top of them they have these black, small, almost pebbles you see from afar, but they're massive.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting to see it. And the people there as well are very interesting, because they're nomadic.
Yeah.
There's a completely different way of life in the city. It's astonishing. You have the city life, and then you have people who just do not understand the city, and how anyone can just sit in these ugly tower blocks and live their life, because they've found beauty in animal husbandry. They've found beauty in the harshest winter and the glorious green summer and streams. It's amazing. It really is. It's like a landscape that's created a certain nomadic way of life that I personally have been really interested in, looking at the Mesolithic before people started farming. And there's very little farming going on in the countryside, so it's all about how people have used animals and for their subsistence strategy. They just have one, and it just means, they're just going to live by following the herds.
So, if there's no farming, this might sound like a bit of a stupid question, but what is it? How are they getting their food in these?
There's lots of imported foods. They do have, I think, there are. When I was standing on top of a hill one morning when we were going out looking for animals.
Yeah.
And in fact, we saw a great number of red deer, which was quite exciting. I looked back and I could see there's just valleys, and then there's hills, and then behind it valley and hill, and it goes on for almost eternity. It's almost like you're just in a game where the creator has just kind of left everything to repeat itself throughout, and you just can't really escape it because it's just valley and hill, valley and hill, valley and hill until the end of the earth. And so I could see a few valleys over, there were some crops being grown, but it's so minimal, and you don't see that. That's only probably takes up about 2% or even 1% of the land mass that goes there. I mean, also because you've got these marauding herds of goats, cattle, horses, they just wipe everything out. So you've got to be very careful to grow stuff. They do import a lot. So
what sort of stuff are they importing then? Because I would have thought, like, with that it's just kind of eating sort of goats and whatever that sort of live there, but
they do. They eat a lot of that. They survive off dairy and meat.
Okay.
And I ate dairy and meat for every single meal. In the morning it was like, sausages, and then you had a bit of porridge, which they were a bit kind of, but really their porridge is kind of grains that they've collected, different grains put in a milk broth, actually milk, and then for lunch you had a certain grain and lamb, and then for dinner it was a certain grain and lamb and some token courtesy cucumber or something. Okay. And so it was very much like I went to a gur and everything smelled like it smelled like horse grease almost, and kind of animal grease, and it felt as though like everything had been polished with a kind of, it was almost as though every animal that they had owned had come into the gur and rubbed their back on the felt surface, the felt cover that they use to cover the gur, and it smelt very, I suppose for the uninitiated like I was, it smelt quite repulsive, but it felt very lived in. But I was invited in, and there's lots of respect going on in the gur. They've got a society of a lot of respect and honour, and so if you need something, you just go into a gur, anyone's gur. It's a stranger. I even heard a story of this Canadian woman who lives there, and she just walked into a gur at 2 a.m. and everyone was sleeping. They just walked in, middle of nowhere, and they woke up and made some milk tea, and then they drank it, and they said, "What are you after? Why have you come to my gur?" And gur, I should say, as an example, as an explanation, is kind of like a yurt that you'd imagine. But instead of it having like a teepee almost structure, it's got a roof and then it's got walls which are circular, and the only kind of the main structure of it is the door. They've kind of, it's hard to see. There's these old oak timber doors that are just kind of almost tied on to this this rounded structure. And it's very hard to explain it really. But when I went in there, it didn't feel like you could live in it because it was so small. But everyone had tucked away all these possessions and all these things that you'd find in your loose drawers in the living room. Yeah. Where where have I put that? I swear I've got something for that, like a head torch. I swear I've got something, a document that you need, right? And they've literally just tucked it behind the timbers that make up the roof. Of their gur. And so I was looking around and I could see these like laminated bits of kids' drawings that their kids had done at school. Yeah. And important documents and spare cash, and everything was tucked in between different timbers, and it was amazing.
So
to
it's
see.
just bits of timber in the roof, or in between the.
Well, because they set it up themselves, it's quite a temporary, almost tent-like structure.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like the spokes of a wheel that is pointed diagonally upwards towards the apex, which is called a tome.
Mm.
And that is almost like the skylight when it's not raining. So
Right.
they can peel it back, and it's kind of a hollow wooden disc that has some structural integrity in spokes in itself. But from there, all the spokes and all the timber framework of this circular structure radiate out,
Yeah.
almost like a hand. And and between those spokes and the felt covering, which is pulled taut over it as the roof,
Right.
are those possessions that you would otherwise find somewhere else in a Western's house, in a drawer somewhere in the kitchen. I just thought it was amazing to see how useful
Yeah.
everything was. Even the structure of the house was like, you need that particular aspect of it.
Yeah, that's quite something. So these, yeah, I mean, what does that make you think? Does it, that sort of, I guess it's quite a minimalist way of living, because you don't have just drawers to put loads of crap in.
Yeah.
You know, you have to just tuck it away.
It definitely makes you think that like the materials they keep are of, you know, they have a very high standard of what to keep and what not to keep.
Yeah. Okay.
They've always got all the possessions are of a particular caliber,
Okay.
use they can't do without.
Yeah.
And so I think nowadays we've got quite a materialistically maximal idea of like hoarding different possessions to put away in different areas. And I mean, my bedroom here is still reminiscent of like a 14-year-old's, because I've still got Airfix models off the wall and things. But I just don't have the heart to say, you know, I could do without it.
Yeah.
Because it's been there for so long. It's part of the character of the room more than anything. And I think in their world, ornamentation in their home and on their bodies is probably quite indulgence.
Yeah.
Because you know they do have their best, you know, that like people had their Sunday best that they'd keep stowed away for a good occasion. These people have just only the most useful and beautiful objects, which I think we have in our own house, a creme de la creme of possessions that we hold in high regard, but yet we've got so much beneath that we just don't need, and that we almost keep just because we have it.
Yeah.
If you were to build it from scratch and say, let's take, you know, if you need to take a briefcase full of possessions and then set up a home again, then that's almost what you'd imagine is in those gers, and those families hold dear to them.
Well, I remember moving out of my university house, and like, it was my last nights in the house, and I just put all my possessions in like these boxes. You know, I didn't have any. I had what I was going to eat that night in the fridge, and it was so nice actually, just sort of being a completely empty room. You know, I just had literally just some minced beef and some olive oil in the kitchen, and I was like, before there's just all this crap that you kind of think you need, but then it's kind of nice without it.
I know, yeah. I often feel like unpacking is almost dirtying a room.
Yeah.
When you get into it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to make a mess, aren't I? Just gonna make a mess. And it doesn't take long until your desk is full of things that you're going to have to be pushing to one side. To try and create the smaller space to try and do some notes on.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling.
It's
a horrible feeling.
But the people there were, the people who lived in the gers were very tight families. But the thing is, they knew almost everything that was going on He didn't need to say that we camp over there, even though you set up camp just that night.
Mm.
You know, you go there the day after and they go, oh yeah, I know, yeah, I know where your camp is. Someone told me, and there's a new neighbour in the valley, and he, you know, and somewhere about 800 yards away, is this tiny little ger that's just being built. And so we rode up to that. We were on horseback most of the time because there were bogs and things we had to go over. And so we rode up to that ger, and they were setting up their camp. They have summer camps and they have winter camps. This is what I mean about nomadic lifestyles. They've got those people. They seek higher ground in the winter because the snowdrifts are so deep in the lowland that it almost like snows them in. So they need the altitude. But strangely enough, most of the livestock they have in the summer dies off in the winter because they've got such poor shelter for them. They've only got like wooden overhanging structures for all their herds, hundreds of goats to live in. And while we were on the way between one ger and the other, we saw this horse that had died that spring, and it hadn't decomposed because of the cold. And so it was just beginning to decompose, and it was so strange to see. You know, it's almost like a film in like a Midwestern, where you had people are walking and they see the skulls of cows just on the floor, and they see rotting corpses of horses, and it's exactly the same there. You walk past it, and you get off your horse and you look at it. And all the herdsmen are like, well, it's just another horse carcass. Then we're just looking at it thinking, God, that's quite something to see. Just a horse lying down, dead, no one's doing anything about it. Because we live in a time where, in a climate that just doesn't, things don't die because of the cold. Things just don't die because of the cold.
Yeah.
And so people who are in their winter shelters, they have their assets tucked away, the assets being their livestock. But if their livestock dies, the assets die with them, and so they have no money. And so they have to move into these almost slums on the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar, the capital. And so you've got this growing each spring. These gers are set up on the outside of the capital, and most of the children are they have to like walk around scrap yards and they just try and make a living and try and find jobs. And so there's not much homeless in the centre. There's not much, you don't feel as though there's much struggle. But in the districts outside of the centre, there's a lot of people who have been herdsmen, and they still have this skill set of being herdsmen. They don't have any assets because all their cows, all their goats have died in the past winter, and so they're practically living off nothing.
Yeah.
But I met the Canadian I was talking about earlier. She had set up a charity whereby she employed these people who were disadvantaged because of this.
Yeah.
And set up a ger factory, and so they know how to build gers because they've been doing it all their life. And she set it up whereby she sells them on to overseas buyers, and keeps them employed. And you can go in there, and we were shown round, and they were there carving and painting these wonderfully decorated beams and tomes and doors. And while we were there, they were pointing out all the different symbols and icons that are on these beams. And a lot of them were, because it was my first day there, I didn't really quite understand it, but it grew on me. The underlying motifs throughout Mongolia. A lot of it is they still worship, because Buddhism now, after the Russians have left, because it used to be a Soviet communist state, they didn't like religion very much.
Yeah.
But now that they've left, they can revert back to Buddhism, and with it shamanism, because they are very shamanistic. They still have shamans, probably only a few. They still have shamans in the countryside, and it's probably looked at as quite voyeuristic now. They don't have the same. Only probably in the most rural places would you really think that they had a lot of power in the community.
Yeah.
But they're like communal healers. And I think Buddhism as a religion can be very well adapted to shamanistic cultures. And shamanistic cultures can adopt Buddhism into it in a very free manner that Christianity says, lays down the law and says, no, you can't worship idols. Buddhism is a lot more free, and you can almost be a Buddhist and shamanistically, and worship shamanistically at the same time, in this dual religious state, because Buddhism is shamanistic in a way. It's got lots of gods. It's polytheistic. It's got all these things that can allow a very free way of worshipping.
I want to just touch on what you're saying about, because obviously Mongolia was a sort of satellite state of the Soviet Union for a long while. How much, and you sort of hinted at this, but how much Russian presence is there in Mongolia, like with these sort of Soviet blocks and stuff?
Well,
or does it have its own kind of feel to it?
I think they've renounced it a lot. There hasn't been kind of like a yearning to go back. They've fought for their independence once, just before the Soviets invaded from China. So they were under Chinese rule, and in Mongolia, Mongolia is in two parts, and it's been cut across the middle, and it must be a very strange way of behaving as a country, where Inner Mongolia is actually under the jurisdiction of China, but Outer Mongolia is independent.
Oh, okay, so there's still a part of Mongolia that's ruled by China, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay.
And recently, within the last 10 years, maybe 5 years ago, China said that that in Inner Mongolia they were not allowed to teach in Mongolian in schools. They had to teach in Chinese, and it's almost like the re-education camps in the north of China. That there's lots of things happening in Inner Mongolia which Chinese people want to keep quiet, or China wants to keep quiet, because it's really like a genocide of culture, where you have those people and their culture entwined, and yet China is trying to break them apart and trying to engulf them into that kind of state, kind of autocracy.
Yeah.
But what I was saying earlier about Russian influence, there is probably, I think the way the weights, the scales are shifting in a way, because you can almost see a tide mark in the people who can speak Russian.
Yeah.
And the people who can't speak Russian. The younger generation are pushing that kind of influence, linguistic influence, out, because they didn't learn Russian. They weren't. Russia wasn't the gateway to a higher education. My opposite number, Dr. Monkbayer, who was.
What is an opposite number?
Like, he was an archaeologist.
Okay.
Who was on the expedition, but he was Mongolian.
Okay.
And I'm an archaeologist from Britain, and we're kind of like we were both like exchanging, or rather, he was telling me a lot about Mongolian archaeology. I'd read a bit about it, but nothing had nothing was ever as useful in the articles as him telling me. But he spoke Russian because he was educated in Moscow.
Yeah.
He got his doctorate in Moscow. And although he was studying Mongolian artifacts and archaeology and even some in Mongolia and China, some cave burials from from the Chinese period, there was a lot of, I suppose I got from that Russia was where intellectual ideas could flourish, and you went there in order to prosper, and then come back to Mongolia.
Yeah.
And so he spoke a lot of Russian. But anyone who was slightly younger than him, and I suppose he was probably about in his 40s.
Okay.
Anyone younger than him didn't speak much Russian.
Okay. Well, they'd speak English instead, or
They had some English, but really in the countryside, no one spoke anything other than Mongolian.
Okay.
There wasn't any Russian, there wasn't any Chinese, there wasn't any English, nothing.
Okay.
And if you went out there as an English person without any translator, countryside stuff, nobody would know what on earth who you are, where you've come from. They probably wouldn't even know where England is.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That is
and they're like,
nuts.
I don't know who this person is, and apparently.
How much of a sense do you think they have of like outside of Mongolia? Like, do you think they'd be able to point to the US on a map, or like Europe or China?
No, I don't think so. And maybe I don't want to sound as though I'm saying they're uneducated. They do go to school, but I think some of those the herdsmen that I met, most of their interest is probably in within Mongolian history and within their culture, because of the way that maybe they're trying to reclaim that independence that they got in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when the Soviet Union started collapsing. And I don't think, I wouldn't be able to, before I went to Mongolia, if it wasn't labelled, I wouldn't be able to point to Mongolia on a map.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not saying that I'm uneducated or they're uneducated, but that it's two very completely different worlds.
Yeah.
And their sphere of influence is, or those that influence them, their neighbours, they could point to China, they could point to Russia. But they've been it's a landlocked country, and culturally it's locked in by the North, Russia. I was at one point very close to the Russian border, and you could see hills in the distance. I was pointed out to them, and they said, "That's Russia there."
What did that feel like?
It felt very strange.
Yeah.
It felt very strange. On the flight back, we flew over Moscow.
Really?
Yeah, flew right over Moscow.
Wow.
I was trying to see it. So you can see on the map, on those long journeys, you have those TV things. And I could see on the map that we were going to fly over Moscow. I'd really like to see it, like lean over.
Yeah.
But because you're on those big planes, there was someone next to me who was falling asleep, and he was asleep on the window. So I couldn't kind of drag him out and be like, "Oh yes, there's Moscow."
That would have been amazing. Yeah.
But I did feel a bit uneasy.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that it was definitely amazing.
And you just got a direct flight?
No, it was through Istanbul.
Okay.
On the way there, Frankfurt on the way back. But it was still on the way back. Actually, I was flying with Mongolian Airlines. That's they've got a big kind of big budget for Mongolian Airlines.
Have they?
It's strange where they're putting their assets.
Yeah.
But they on the way back, I was flying with Mongolian Airlines, and they had put all these old 1960s, 1970s classics, Mongolian classics, on, and every single one of them was just so strange. Yeah, they were films, right? So they were like almost wild westerns, but they had very strange folklore where there was a foolish old father who didn't understand the virtue of one of his sons, and the two other sons were bad, and it was almost like Cinderella.
Yeah.
It was like the two ugly brothers who were always greedy, and then this wizard went in disguise. There was no subtitles or sounds, so I couldn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah.
But I gathered from it, and there were films about wrestling, and there were films about horse racing. There wasn't a film about archery, because there's the three sports in Mongolia: horse racing, wrestling, archery. and at Nadam Festival, which is almost like a summer fete in every town, but it's more like Christmas because the night before we were camping beside a road that was going to a village that was on the road between Ulaanbaatar and a village we were going to.
Mm-hmm.
And Ulaanbaatar at that point was hundreds of kilometres away. It was probably about 2 days' drive to get to.
Yeah.
And there was an endless stream throughout the night of a convoy of vehicles just driving with their headlights just across this plain, going up the hill and over to the village. And they're all coming from Ulaanbaatar, and there are all these families that were, it was almost like something biblical where Mary and Joseph had to go back to the village of their birth on a specific day for the censer. But they were all driving back, all these families who had gone into Ulaanbaatar to find work. They're all drawn back to their village. So there was one day in this village that suddenly it was packed and everyone was there. And everyone was wearing their Sunday bests.
Yeah.
Right? And their Sunday bests are these amazing coloured, they call them dells,
Yeah.
kind of robes with this mandolin collar, kind of collarless, but in the way that it's fixed is it's kind of like you pull it across and there's a line down there. And they're the most amazing colours, you know, they're dark, rich blues, which like made of this material that almost glints, almost like silk, and all kinds of things, all kinds of headgear. It was absolutely brilliant to see everyone in strange attire. The one thing I would say though is that everyone wore traditional dress as well as a baseball cap.
Okay.
And so it was actually quite annoying. Yeah, together.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was seeing them and I was thinking, you know, they're really getting into their cultural history.
Yeah.
And they're dressed up in such an authentic manner. And then they've got a baseball cap.
Yeah. I mean, you showed me that trailer before we started this.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting seeing that Mongolian guy who was on one of the horses, and he was wearing like an Adidas tracksuit, and I just thought like for that sort of design to penetrate so far.
I know, it's
amazing, isn't it?
It's weird, and whether they know the not implications, but whether they know like the social narrative that's behind.
Yeah.
You know, tracksuits like leisure wear, everything like that. It's very odd. The one of them was wearing this stunning jacket. It was almost cut like this, but it was bright red, and it had these red embroidered cuffs that kind of folded in the most outrageous manner.
Yeah.
Like the cuffs were folded back up like that much, and it was amazing. And I was like, I really want one of those jackets. And I went into an avatar seeking those jackets like a heat-seeking missile. I just couldn't find them anywhere. So obviously, you know, there's some back street.
Yeah.
There's some back street tailoring.
That's when you go next, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the Mongolian language, because obviously I'm quite interested in the scripts of Mongolia because I understand it's written in Cyrillic.
Right.
And sometimes in the Latin alphabet. But apparently there's a sort of traditional Mongolian script as well that's making a resurgence. Is this like, what's your observations? Like, what script were people writing in on the street signs, or you know, in?
I think it was Cyrillic all the way.
Okay.
Except on banknotes sometimes when they had the old. It's almost like us having, you know, Charles Dickens' signature on the banknotes. For them, it's like old scripts that
sort of
read down.
The
most interesting part of it, Alfie, is the fact that they have lots of the grammatical structure of Mongolian is very close to Turkish.
Okay.
As well as Kurdistan, but not Russia. And there's almost like so you've got China kind of muscling in below Mongolia, and you've got Russia kind of sweeping this way, and China and Russia almost meet I think they do meet actually for about 50 miles, and then Mongolia is there, and it kind of gets funneled into and it peters out, and then there's Kurdistan that goes all the way down to the Black Sea where Turkey is. And they actually, in the history of Mongolian, and it's very confusing. I was very confused when they started telling me this. There's Turkic people.
Yeah.
The Turkic people populated Mongolia, and I thought, this just doesn't sound right because Turkey's so far away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you've got all these headstones of with men's faces on, which are kind of grave stones or monuments tributing the memory as a tribute to the memory of a certain person, famous nobleman in their time.
Yeah.
And they say this is Turkic. And I go, but we're in Mongolia, how is that Turkic? Like, how do they manage that? So somehow, the Turkic people went down into, they went east. They went through Mongolia from the north.
Okay.
They went through Mongolia, settled there for a while, and then moved east into what is now Turkey. And
they went west.
They went west into what is now Turkey.
Yeah.
That would be quite a feat actually if they went east.
That would be quite a feat.
I think we know about it a bit more. And it's just amazing because you look at them and you think they don't look anything like Turkish people. Yeah. Turkish people. They said, well, the Turkish people who live there now are somehow genetically influenced by Europeans, so they have a kind of half and half mix of appearances. But someone who was on our trip who was actually Turkish, she said that one of the professors looked just like his uncle, who was Turkish.
Right.
And apparently there's some similarity there. And I don't know how that kind of strange history of Turkic people has been lost, because I've never heard of it before. I had no idea about how strange you know about people travelling across the Bering Strait to get to America and populate America from Mongolia.
I didn't know that actually. Wow.
Yeah, they went over the Bering Strait into Alaska, and then from there, and you can kind of see it. I think there's some kind of it's weird on a map. You can't really tell, but I suppose on the equator there's a lot more actual land than around the northern hemisphere, because in northern Lapland, the people who were adapted there and native populations, they look a lot like Mongolians, and they share a lot of kind of semi-pseudo-Asian features that seem to just kind of have a band around the north to North America.
Yes,
and I think maybe in the northern hemisphere there's actually a lot less land that we're talking, even though if you spread it out on the map, it all has to fit along the same bands. With in accordance to the equator, there's so much, but then if you were to go up the latitudes, it funnels off to a smaller.
Okay, it's small. Yeah, the maps are quite bad, aren't they?
But even then, it's an amazingly long period, a long stretch on the map, which somehow I really don't know about it much. I've definitely strayed away from my knowledge base.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the person who looked like a Turk, he was called Professor Turbish, and Turbish in Mongolian means no name.
Right.
And when he was younger, this is going back to the shamanistic. Yes, please. They're going back to the shamanistic culture in Mongolia. He was ill as a boy, and their parents thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
And so they took away his name.
Right.
And they said, "We'll call him no name.
Okay.
Because then the evil spirits can't spot him, right? The evil spirits will be like, "Oh, well, who is this? Is this Clive? And they go, no, this isn't Clive. I don't know who it is. There's no one.
Yeah.
There's nobody. So leave him away. And they're like, okay, well, where's Clive gone? I don't know. And so putting a name onto a child almost seems like, in the spirit world, kind of underneath the real world around them, there's the spirit world in which that label still holds gravity. And so you find a few people who are all called Turbish.
Yeah.
And it's because when they were younger they had an illness. And he was amazing. Apparently he was like a big cheese in Mongolia. He knew a lot about the countryside. He was a big professor.
Yeah.
And he did have some kind of gravitas. He was always very happy. And he had this grilled tooth. He had like silver tooth. Mad hair, glasses. And he was always just like, yeah, it's bonkers. It was absolutely amazing.
Do you believe that kind of... Because I've become very interested in that sort of, like, kind of less conventional approaches to illness. And like, you know, it's like a sort of spirit, sort of taking hold of you or whatever. Like, what do you think about that stuff?
I think interesting. It's very interesting. Bring it up because when I was at university, I decided to read a lot about anthropology and folklore and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was talking about how the evolutionary advantage of that is actually quite strong because if you're going through a certain illness, life-threatening illness, or childbirth, or something like this, if you believe in something that's beyond you and transcend your sufferance and think of that sufferance as some kind of spiritual endurance, and it's more about the spirit than the body that has to endure, then you somehow focus your energy on something else, an other, and you're more likely to survive hardships in life through illness, stress, if you have belief in something greater than yourself and greater in the cosmos than if you simply don't have any belief. You know, they say there's no atheist before battle.
That is quite a quote. Yeah.
There's no atheist before battle.
Yeah.
Because because you need that in order to break through whatever bodily endurance is needed. You need the other mind over matter, just kind of evolutionary speaking. It was probably ideal for you to believe in something in order to get through certain things that other people wouldn't and leave behind those people who didn't. So that's why I think we have got this kind of residual belief where if you're going through something pretty hard, if you're going through an illness, people revert back to that spirituality.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Because it actually works.
Yeah.
I think it actually works. It's hard to explain how it doesn't work. Because if you believe that something's there to help you, to guide you, if you believe you've got some kind of protector, a guardian, then it kind of almost pulls you through. Just need that little pull in order to get through. And there's loads of stories throughout time of people with beliefs who have gone through that endurance, got out.
When you were there, I remember you saying this, I can't remember exactly what the thing was, but it was something, you were going to be looking at something to do with Ghengis Khan, like where he was buried or something like that?
Yeah, well, I wasn't.
Yeah.
But my, I think a bit of Chinese whispers, my mum kind of might have exaggerated it a bit.
Oh, okay.
Being like, I remember actually before I left, my mum was on the phone going, yeah, and he's going to Mongolia, and he's going to find Genghis Khan's grave. And I was there going, no, I'm not. She was going, no. Yeah, he is. And I was like, well, this is
Guess so, yeah.
But we did actually find, I think it was more what we were expecting, what most people were expecting on the expedition when I talked to them, was really going out and finding something new.
Mm.
But what we actually experienced was lots of the professors, like for example, I mean it was most apparent in archaeology because we had botanists, and we had zoologists, and we had an ornithologist, birds. He was short-sighted, which was weird because you need. It was really weird. He was like on his phone and he was like this, just trying to type in his password.
Yeah, wrong job, mate.
Yeah, wrong job. I mean, that's just because he was wearing binoculars all his life. He's kind of strained his eyes. He needed glasses.
Probably.
He needed glasses. But it was more apparent in archaeology, where Dr. Mukbar he was a bit of a lone ranger. He was a bit of a lone wolf, right?
Yeah.
And so I think he felt like I was a bit of a tag-along.
Right.
So he'd often kind of be a bit reluctant. Not reluctant, he'd translate a lot. But he'd be like, I'm just going to tell you about this, and then wander off while it's being translated. And so it was a kind of a one-way situation.
Okay.
But he was there, he already knew where everything was. It had all been surveyed in, but it hadn't been properly documented in terms of its like dimensions.
Right.
And so he'd go, oh, I know where something is. Today we're going to go there, and you can get your tape measure out and measure it. And there were some really interesting deer stones. But the only time that we did actually find something, we actually found something, Alfie.
You did?
Like, we actually found something that no one else had found before. And it was, one morning, David, who was this GP from somewhere or other, he said, Hector, I've got this, I think there's a tomb up there on top of the hill. And I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And we were nestled at the bottom of the hill. Very, very, very small hill that just kind of went up with all these rocky outcrops and then went down over the valley somewhere else. And so I said, okay, I'll get Dr. Mukbar. So I got Dr. Mukbar, and I said, I kind of communicated more with hands, like going up the hill, might see something. And he said, okay. And so we all walked up, and as I got closer to it, I said, David, please don't tell me you think that's the tomb. And it was one of those huge rocks that had just been put on top of the hill, like the one I was saying earlier. It was a geological feature, and I was there, and Dr. Mukbar looked disappointed, and I was trying to say, no, that wasn't my idea, it was David's. David was the one who said that I wouldn't have had any say in it. So while I was there lampooning David for making me look like an utter trollop, Dr. Mukbar was looking down at the camp from the hill. And there was a little plateau that we couldn't see from the camp, looking up the hill, but you could see looking down. And on it was this little grave. And he was like, oh, what's this? And so I dropped David. And I was like, what? And we walked down. And he said, this is a Mongolian Empire tomb.
Right.
That hasn't been documented yet. And it was literally about 2-minute walk away from camp, just up the hill.
Wow.
So it's it just shows so many things in Mongolia. It's such an expansive, I can't express to you how expansive it feels when you're there. It's just hills and hills and hills and hills and hills. It's just like, I said this, and I don't know whether it's I said it in Mongolia, looking out, and I guess if someone actually saw it and what I was referring to, then they'd be like, yeah, fine. But I felt like it was some kind of phyllo pastry with just thousands of little layers that had all kind of rustled up in the oven, right? And they'd all bump. And it was almost like a layering of hills just going off and off and off. And you just couldn't you just lay back and you just thought, I can't possibly go there because there's just too much to see. There's too much to see. And then with a little later on, we went to a fort, or a fortified settlement. It wasn't a fort. That was believed to be part of Ghengis Khan's network of residences, royal residences. And it's believed that Ghengis Khan, or Chinggis Khan, that's how you meant to pronounce it. Just let that over to because there's lots of different ways to pronounce it.
Yeah.
It's written Genghis Khan. But then some people pronounce it Genghis Khan. I was corrected by this boy at Nadam. He was like, no, it's not Genghis Khan, it's Genghis Khan. I was like, okay, Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went there and it felt very. There was this fortified settlement. It's believed that's where Genghis Khan's horse was buried, that he fell off and died because he fell off a horse.
Right.
And so his horse was buried there. But there was very minimal excavation. There was some kind of huge bulldozing excavation in the 1920s by the Russians. But apart from that, nothing. And we went in it. And the thing is, because it's boarded off, there's no way that horses can get in it to graze, or cattle to get in to graze. And so because it's all walled off. And so it's actually got plants in. It's actually got like dwarf almond and trees and coppices and everything. And so in it is a lot more ecology. So when we went in there were vipers slithering around, and lots and lots of horseflies, and lots of different insects, and the horseflies were just relentless. As soon as you walked out of the walls, as soon as you stepped over a clump of collapsed wall, the horseflies stopped almost immediately, and it felt very haunted because of that. It felt very haunted because we were trying to walk the one wall up. It didn't care about topography, this wall. It just went up the side of the steep valley, and it was a dry stone wall, and I think it must have been built by Chinese slaves, because when the Mongols were at their height, they actually invaded a lot of China.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think it was Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, who said, "What is the point of us keeping Chinese people alive? We might as well kill them all.
Right.
Kill all the Chinese people, and then there'll be loads of grass for our horses to eat. Just our entire country we can just put our horses on to eat." And I think, thankfully, an advisor said, yes, but we get a lot of money from their taxes. And so it was like, okay, well, we can leave them away then. So, I mean, if that had gone the other way, China might have been very different.
I mean, they're just relentless, the Mongols, aren't they?
Yeah. But I think that's what made them so powerful. I went all the way to Vienna.
Yeah.
They got all the way to Vienna. They people in Vienna saw Mongol scouts on the hills around Vienna, and they were closing in, and they would have absolutely swept Europe as though it was just flicking an ant off the table.
Yeah.
And then Genghis Khan died, or perhaps one of his sons. And then there was a race to get back and inherit the most. And so everyone, all these warriors who were ready to attack, then kind of heard of this news, and they turned around and they were like, "Okay, we better go back and sort this out." And they never returned again.
Wow.
So they were so close to absolutely demolishing a lot of what we know about 13th century Europe, and completely changed history.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of stuff in the Balkans, in the Urals, up to Vienna.
That's amazing how it just kind of seemingly just sort of left very little trace.
Well, that's the thing, because they're nomads, because they are herdsmen and nomadic, they don't leave any trace.
Yeah.
When we were going round, when we were driving around Mongolia, you could see a lot of vodka bottles. There was a lot of vodka bottles.
Really?
And apparently, sometime around Nadam, there's a certain group of people who just go around demanding alcohol from different girls.
Really?
Like, go into one girl and they say, because of hospitality, they're offered milk tea, and they say, let's have the vodka. And so they have to give them the vodka, and they drink it. And they go to the next girl, more drunk. And it's like a
Mongolian pub crawl
across an entire country, because it's
Wow.
just go after go after go, valley after valley. You just don't need to stop.
Yeah.
You can just do that all your days. They really like snuff there as well.
Really?
Yeah,
Do they?
lots of snuff. And apparently, someone who brought this whole tub of snuff that he bought somewhere.
Yeah.
This Texan, this really interesting man called Hollins.
Yeah.
Who's Texan, but he went to Mongolia when he was 16 or 15 to go there because he said, I want to go somewhere, to his mum when he was 15. He said, I want to go somewhere else.
Right.
And just see what school's like anywhere else. And his mum said, oh, how about Mongolia? I'll send you off. And so packed his bags and he went off to Mongolia. And he turned to me when he saw this bucket of snuff, and he said, Hector, Harry, who's the name, he said, Hector, Harry could he could travel Mongolia just with that. He could go into Gurus, and he could get very far. Go very, very far away just with that bucket of snuff, because all the Mongolians you see, I used to talk as though there was like a typewriter in front of him.
Yeah.
And it was like, he'd often like tap a few keys of it when he was talking. I go, honestly, these Mongolians, they love snuff. They love snuff. They are pretty addicted to the stuff. Yeah. So
Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought it? And I was actually offered some snuff I was very privileged in Nadam, the festival itself.
Yeah.
There was archery going on. There were 7-year-olds racing horses.
Yeah.
Because they're lighter, they're like jockeys almost.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of that going on. And I poked my head into a gur, which was this. It was bigger than usual. It was really, really big actually. And I poked my head in, and I realised that that was the mayor's gur. That was kind of like the mayor's gur, the chief's gur. And he was there. He was quite old, but he had this amazing dell and all these medals just strapped across him, like all these medals. Just he was almost jingling with it, with the amount of medals he had. I don't know what they were. Maybe wrestling or some kind of. I'm not sure. I put my head down and thought, oh no, that's the wrong one. So I thought it was display or something. So I walked away. As I was walking away, with this friend as well, who was part of the expedition, who were just fooling around. And they beckoned us, and this woman came out and said, no, come in. And so I went in, and they beckoned me to a seat which this woman was sitting in, and she had to get up and leave. Yeah. Because we were like higher, and she was there just trying to have a lunch. And she saw us come in, and she was like, all right. So she put down her lunch and just got up. And so I sat down literally in front of this meal that she was eating. And they were like, please eat it, please.
Really?
No, this is it. And it was a low table, it was low. Yeah. And the one that the mayor was sitting on was this high table. Yeah. So it was almost diagonally above me was this mayor. And there's these two spokes, these two timber frames, two ones that actually come diagonally, vertically down in the centre of the gur. And if you walk in between them, it's a big taboo. There's lots of taboos going on in Mongolia. Oh yeah. Because of the superstition. Yeah. If you walk in between the two, because it almost represents the man and the woman. Right. If you walk in between the two, you are wishing ill fate to their marriage. Right. Okay. Basically saying, you two, you're going to break up. Yeah. And this whole the house is going to fall. So I was being very careful in this prestigious position not to muck up. And so they offered me some milk tea, and I was there with Emma, the friend. Yeah. And I was there going, oh, this is lovely. So I kind of had it, and I was like, oh, cheers, Emma, cheers. And I thought, oh, I've just cheers with that, that's fine. I'll cheers with the people on the high table. So I was like, oh, cheers. And they were like, no cheers. Because they didn't speak any English. Okay. But they were like, vodka. Yeah. Good. Okay. Nothing else. And apparently it was only alcohol that you needed cheers with. It's a bit like here, I guess. Yeah. But I don't know why. I just thought it's ceremonious. I need to do something good. Yeah. And then so later on.
That's a weird idea that because I do think we only really cheers. I mean, you can cheers a cup of tea, but it does seem weird somehow.
It does. Yeah, it does. Because it's just I don't know why. Maybe that's because it's followed on here as well. You don't usually cheers unless you got something alcoholic.
Yeah.
Splos.
Yeah.
Then later on, I was
Sorry.
delivered. Someone came up from my table.
Yeah.
With a little jade bottle of snuff.
Really?
And they presented it on like a napkin on their hand. I was like, oh, okay, snuff, great, okay, thank you. I unscrewed the lid and there was this little spoon coming off it. So I put a little bit of snuff on, and everyone went quiet to see how. I had a bit of blocked nose at that time, and so I was like, I was trying to like get a bit of get something in my nose even though it was really blocked.
Yeah.
And I was snivelling like a wretch. And then I kind of said, oh, thank you, Bayalah, which is thank you in Mongolian. One of the few words I know. The only word I know. And his smile kind of faded. And it turns out you put it on the back of your hand with the spoon.
Right.
And then you sniff it from there.
Okay.
And I just put the whole spoon in my nose. And I was like, oh no. And so I just thought, I'm just going to sit there quietly and just pretend. And just try and not...
God, there are so many rules.
There's so many... There were, yeah.
So you didn't get much of an experience from the snuff then, I take it?
No, I didn't get much. I mean, Harry and everyone in camp probably had half the snuff anyway.
Yeah.
They were just like, after dinner everyone would start drinking, and then you just get the snuff and just start taking it.
Yeah.
I didn't feel anything from it, to be honest.
Do they smoke, Mongolians?
They do smoke a little.
Yeah.
But probably only to substitute the snuff, really.
Yeah, interesting.
But yeah, I think Mongolia is just an amazingly... They say you can never go once. You always have to keep coming back. And it's just so bizarre. It's just so strange.
Do you think you will go back in the future?
I think I'm saying no now, but I think if an opportunity arises again, I think I will. Or maybe because it's the first time I left Europe, maybe it's given me a taste for the world beyond.
Yeah.
But nowhere else is going to be as strange and as foreign to English people, to England or Europe as there, because you have your own prejudices about particular and your own preconceived perceptions of what Russia's like, what China's like, what South America's like, what's like. But Mongolia is just somewhere no one really knows, because it's such a... You can see all these influences from all the other places. Like, you've got Kyrgyzstan embroidery patterns on Chinese textile, and people are speaking in a Turkic tongue, but with grammatically, but then it's a kind of a twisted Russian and China kind of grinding against each other into this language.
Yeah.
And it's really brilliant. It's really brilliant. There's lots of in it, so it's by kla. You have to do a lot of
Okay.
which is really odd.
What does that mean?
It's just the way that they've just how we go with
what you said though.
how we go. Oh, the by kla.
What does that mean?
Means thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure there are 1,001 more stories, but I feel as though I've covered maybe the most salient ones.
Yeah.
Just the history. It's really good. Really good.
Sounds fascinating. So, what's next for you in life? Coming back from Mongolia.
That's the question. I hope to go up to York, carry on being a field archaeologist.
Yeah.
But then again, that's just because that's what I know and that's what I love. I love field archaeology. I love being there in the moment when something's uncovered and being like, what is this? I've in past years I've found a whole horse just buried, and they found another one this year on the same site, and you find bone pins from Anglo-Saxon pits. It's amazing. I feel like, however, that I don't know. I feel as though I need to be a bit more creative in that, because I go to work and I dig, and it pedals the mind. You know, whenever you're going on walks, whenever you go on things that are kind of a contemplative, mindless task.
Yeah.
Very soothing and cathartic. It pedals the mind. It gets the mind going, and so I've thought a lot about how to be creative in that. So I'm definitely going to tinker maybe a week or two with different ideas before settling into a particular idea of what's going next. But it's full of opportunities. I'm very lucky to be in a discipline that I love, with so many different ways in and out, and putting different parts of what I love about it into position.
Sounds like a really fascinating journey you're going on.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you do this podcast in a year, I don't know. Maybe I'll be settled into some strange job.
That would be really interesting to hear about. Like, I can tell. I'm sure it's just the beginning. You know.
Yeah, it is. It is. At the moment, I'm just trying to think about how best to do it. I've got so many opportunities, so many possibilities.
It's difficult to just pick one a lot of the time. That's almost the hardest thing.
Well, yeah, it's a dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of having too much choice. Sounds like I'm taking it for granted, but it's always like, if you've got too much choice, it's hard to pick one. Like if you're offered 3 jams, which jam do you want, Alfie? You know?
Yeah.
I'll have the
How
marmalade.
do you even decide that? You know.
And then if you're offered hundreds of jams, it's like, well, I'm gonna have to figure out which one is gonna suit the amazing amount of bread selection that you've given me. You know?
Yeah.
Fat jam and toast wouldn't have gone down too badly with this cup of tea.
That would have been pretty perfect.
Although it wouldn't be good for podcasts, kind of just like munching and going.
Yeah, I think it would suit the kind of aesthetic though. The sort of.
It would actually, yeah. It would
country house aesthetic we've got.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the summer.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your very interesting story in Mongolia.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
You've definitely been enticing out different aspects of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just still mellowing into it. Still mellowing into the way that it's changed my outlook on particular shamanistic beliefs.
Yeah.
And archaeology. Definitely very
Sweet.
informative. Very nice.
Right, stop there?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
How do you end your... Oh, we've gone 8 minutes over.
Yeah.